Hey guys, on this episode of EdTech, we're going to be talking with Ernie Bailey and Rob Raspberry. We're going to be talking about maintaining relationships, AV on healthcare, and the PSNI Supersummit. All this and more on EdTech.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is EdTech, episode 59, Maintaining Relationships.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Extron Electronics and by Uteligy.
This is EdTech, the monthly higher ed AV podcast. I'm your host, Bill O'Donnell, and today I'm joined by the one and only Mr. Ernie Bailey. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Bill.
That's good. So, today we're going to cover a couple of topics, and as I say, it's primarily going to be me and Ernie, mostly because, well, it's the beginning of the spring semester, and I won't lie, juggling chainsaws, and everyone's kind of gotten into their groove, and more than anything, it turns that's when the real rubber meets the road, in which usually faculty suddenly go and say, "Hey, I remember when it was like this. Can we do this now?" And so, much like many tech managers, you're all of a sudden trying to do tune-ups on a stock car on the Indy 500, and you're trying to do adjustments while it's running. So anyway, moving on from that, we're going to cover our first article, which comes to us via Sound and Communications magazine, and that is Healthcare on the Network. Now, if you take a look at the article, it kind of covers about how the Lehigh Valley Health Network has kind of expanded, and as well as the fact that they've also merged together with the Pocono Health System, and through that, they ended up actually becoming one of the largest hospitals in the area. It's actually one of the biggest hospital organizations in the U.S. now because of that, and you're probably asking, okay, but what does this actually have to do with everything? It's because in their case, they actually ended up having to expand their AV and dedicate portable systems and kind of make portable telemedicine carts. And it's kind of interesting how they've kind of grown about this, because anytime you end up merging systems together, it's kind of, different companies different organizations have different standards. And more the point in this case, when you're dealing with telemedicine, you can't exactly have things where it's like, well, that's good enough. Good enough is the things where all of a sudden it's like, well, you don't look that bad. And then all of a sudden you change over to the other company's, the other organization's system, and you suddenly look and see where, myself, someone may have looked at me and gone, "Oh, Bill, you color-wise, you look pretty good." And, the next camera comes along, and next thing you know, it's, "Bill, we're pretty sure off of this system, it looks like you have jaundice." So it's one of those back and forth things. But Mr. Ernie, I figure I'd ask you about this as to the wonderful world of the telemedicine on this one, and how this kind of affects how you guys do things at your school and everything.
As you and I have discussed before, we are a hospital with a university attached, academic health science center.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot of telemedicine. We were an early adopter of telemedicine. When the industry first kind of got started, we looked at all different types. I've kind of worked on the fringe of that area.
Mm-hmm.
It's been, I've been involved, but not immersed in it.
Mm-hmm.
I can talk a little bit about it, but yeah, you're right. You have to have standards set up, and you have all your equipment has to work together. With telemedicine, like if you have a projector go down in a classroom, you might be able to continue a lecture.
Mm-hmm.
Or you might be able to move to another room. That's not always a possibility with telemedicine. Your equipment has to work consistently. You have to be ready. You have to have technicians available to support whatever's going on. You need to be able to train your physicians, and the physicians have to know how to use the equipment, and it needs to be similar to what they're using in a regular clinical setting. so they're comfortable using it. And if you give them something different every month, us AV guys always like the newest, latest, greatest technology out there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have to slow down in telemedicine, and we have to first make sure it works and that we understand how it works and how to keep it working. And then we have to work with the physician to make sure they're comfortable using it, because they're treating a patient, from a distance, or, they're looking at x-rays or charts in a different manner than what they're used to. They can't flip pages on paper, or, hold an x-ray up to a light the way they used to.
Yeah, and that's the thing that they actually talked about in the article, is that one of the big things, like kind of rolling along with it and all, was the fact that they actually said they preferred doing analog cameras, which is not something you always hear all the time. But according to them, and really if you kind of read it down a little bit more, it does make sense in the fact that I think in their cases what they describe as analog cameras, and hey, there's Mr. Rob Raspberry. Hello, sir. We'll be with you in just a sec. So what is this. When it comes to like the analog cameras, everyone hears, oh, we have digital cameras. Oh, we have analog cameras. I think it's really more of, in their case, we're talking about cameras that actually have like, real optics in them. Because
you get digital artifacts with a digital zoom or anything like that. You don't need those things injected. You need to be able to properly white balance your camera so you get good color.
Yeah.
Things like that. Go back to, I started out in broadcast production, and it's very similar, to what we had to do then with the old analog cameras.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's one of those things where, and believe me, if we're talking about things where it's like, yes, the clarity and content does matter. When it comes down to well, rather have digital zoom versus physical zoom. Oh, you'll take physical zoom any day of the week, because guess what? The glass is the glass.
It looks like what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah. Whereas digital, it's kind of like, well, how much money did you guys spend on the imaging chip? So it's along those lines. But the other part of it was just as you got into it with the equipment. It's one of those things where if you read through, they're actually starting to finally really use like before they had like if you read through it, they had a dedicated kind of sonnet or fiber ring network, which you kind of look and I go, oh, I remember those days. If you're not familiar with it, it's literally it's a double backed kind of looped system, which is great, except for the fact that at that point you then also have to build in every single endpoint wherever you need. You're almost creating two separate networks, and your IT folks, your network folks will look at that and go, fine, whatever. Just remember, you're managing that stuff yourself. That anything goes kaboom, that's your problem.
Right.
So but anyways, so that's what we have on this one. So like I said, in the midst of juggling chainsaws, I'm sure Rob was probably putting out a fire somewhere. As I say, we are joined today also by Mr. Rob Raspberry. How are you from Drexel University? How are you, sir?
Doing fantastic today, Bill. How's everybody?
It's just peachy on this nice somewhat blustery day. So as I say, like I said, Rob, we were just kind of going over one of the articles. The next one we were going to go over was actually our let's see here. Oh yeah, it's actually comes to us from AVNation. Shameless plug here. It's actually through one of our compatriots, Mr. Brock McGinnis, in which it's talking about being led astray, and by that we mean LED astray. And it kind of talks about how if you've ever been to Infocom, and Rob and Ernie can both attest to this and everything, when you go through, there's tons and tons of various vendors and everything, and there's always the one section that usually there's a lot of Chinese manufacturers and folks from like Singapore and Japan and things like that, and you look around and you go and say, oh wow, these are really cool, and then you look at the price and you're like, this doesn't make sense. And you kind of work everything together. And then, my personal favorite is the fact that you can always know when you're going through that area, mostly because you need to have sunglasses in order to do anything. Because, for them, it's, turn the intensity to 100%. Now, what does this all have to do with it? With Brock's article? It's because the fact that a lot of folks really invest heavily into looking at what's the most cost-effective brand, because everyone originally has been going, oh, LEDs prices are coming down, things are getting cheaper. Well, they are. At the same time, you're also getting what you pay for. So it's one of those things like, Rob, I'm sure you know as well as I do, what you get is what you pay for, and so you do have to be kind of aware of those things. Has a product is there ever come a time where you've had some products or something where folks go, oh, this is insane, this is such a great bargain, and later on you kind of figured out, they scrimped
Why
something.
it's a bargain.
Yeah. So the biggest story pretty much I have across the board was back, 10 years ago or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
People would come in and pretty much sell you this fantastic price on an LED or a plasma, and then you find out it's a consumer grade product. Oh, that's a great price. Well, there's a reason for it. So sort of on a higher level, you get what you pay for. If you're going to buy a display, you better make sure it's commercial grade so that lasts, not the, even price consumer grade model, for that. So that's like the biggest thing that I've seen as far as, some vendors putting that forward to you. And unless you catch it, in less than a year, boom, you're going to replace it with something else.
And you got to go explain to instructors or why they can buy a much cheaper TV at Best Buy than what you can put in their conference room for them.
Right, exactly.
You go through that spiel about, warranty and, a home TV is designed to, run 3 to 4 hours a day. You're running 8 to 12.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, my personal fave, and this does wrap back to Brock's article in a second here, was the fact that our capital planning folks said, "Oh, we got this great deal on a TV." I went, "Oh, okay, sure, fine, whatever." Go in and we connect up a display to it, and put in an immersive pod to it, and all right, there you go, Bob's your uncle. Have a good day. Cool. About a month later, the power gremlins on campus, because you can never have a college campus without some sort of power mishap, went and zapped the display. Well, it didn't do that much damage. It only shorted out the power supply on it and everything. But it was from Sharp, and it was a residential model. Well, okay, call up Sharp. We gave them the address. They went, oh, okay, sure, we'll send someone out. Well, it took the repair guys about 2.5 hours to get there. Now, mind you, Sharp's headquarters at the time was only maybe about 40 minutes down the road from us. They're over in Clifton, New Jersey. It's like you could huck a rock and probably it would probably have hit them. And we're going, eventually the guys got here and we're like, what took you? And they were like, Oh, well, you see, for that model and everything, they subbed it out to us and this and that. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh, well, it's a residential. Well, these are residential TVs. The fact we're coming in an office, I mean, they're like, technically this is void in the warranty, but we're here. And, you got to go, God bless you guys for, honoring the warranty. Back in my brain was going, oh, this would have been such bad news had we, gone full disclosure. But at the other end of it, it's, you have to kind of, it's one of those things of like understanding your brands and understanding, why things cost they do and why you go with certain brands. Like, for example, and I'm sure Ernie and Rob, you guys probably have a similar setup for your projectors. You guys are primarily what, Epson?
Well, to be honest with you, we're sort of a mishmash. We do have some Epsons, some Panasonics. To be honest, I probably am going to try some Sonys in the future because they give us, I hate to say it, a great price, but we'll see how the quality is before we pull it in. But basically, we have Epsons and Panasonics, and we're obviously changing over to laser projectors. So, yep.
And Ernie, how about yourself?
We're Epson and NEC.
Okay, so for
I'm going to go, I've always taken a little bit different route as opposed to price. So what can I get service on? And that's changed over the years,
That's a good point.
Which the local service rep, or even the sales rep that'll come sit in my office, talk with me, and then they'll answer my calls if we have a problem, and they'll get me an advanced replacement or whatever. Those are the ones I'm going to look at. I'm willing to pay a little bit more if I've got a good support behind it.
And and that's actually is like what we do in our case. Here we're primarily an NEC house, but it's also because for us we have we use the Star Student program. Now, if you're not familiar with it, they give NEC will go and extend the warranty to 5 years as long as you register the product with them, and they don't ask any it's minimal questions asked, and in a lot of cases. Thank goodness for this. They like in terms of like say large scale displays, they'll do an advanced replacement. Because they know, at least with us, if a display goes down, well, congrats, the classroom's down, and not for nothing, no faculty is going to go, oh yeah, sure, I'll just do my entire lesson off the whiteboard. Yeah, that happens rarely, if ever. Maybe the music department, but so but that kind of rolls into the other thing. Just recently there was the PSNI Supersummit, which if you're not familiar with it, it's a kind of a global alliance. It's a mix of both integrators as well as manufacturers who kind of they all kind of crosstalk and are able to find say you're an end user and you're like, oh, I'm looking for this, but we have this big of a project and this and that. PSNI can actually help integrators as well as manufacturers do some good crosstalk and kind of come up with better solutions for folks. And particularly in this case, I was invited to speak on a panel in which it was talking about things from the end user experience, viewpoint. And one of the big things that really kind of came across all 5 folks, and we're talking, there was a fellow from the International Monetary Fund. There was a fellow from Bloomberg, Bloomberg International, as well as myself and a few other folks. And the basic consensus that they kind of gave forward to a lot of folks were 2 things. One is the fact that, just about every end user is well aware of, the hardware that's out there. You don't really have to sell it to us because, we read the press releases just as much as everybody. But the second thing is, kind of culturing a relationship with folks. And, Ernie, I'm sure you have, it's one of those things where we're getting beyond just, the big box sales. It's really at times really more of, okay, I have this much equipment. I want to do this. What can you do for me? How can you make the solutions better? Because it's not about install stuff, because listen, things kind of boil down, at least on the education side. It's either we end up doing it ourselves, or they contract it out, and it suddenly becomes you're watching the contract and watching the contractors and everything. But it's how you have that relationship. And if anything, I'm actually going to start off first with Rob. How do you maintain your relationships with your vendors or your integrators and everything? Do they actually come up to you and be like, hey, how's things going? And do they pull the sales pitch first with you, or do they do more of a, well, we knew this didn't work in the past. This, here's a better solution.
Yeah, I think we've all gone down that same road. So typically, you take a look, there's always that initial pitch. And they're pretty much, across the board the same kind of thing. We can do this, we can do that. But then what you look for are follow-ups. They may stop by, say how things are going, or if they did an install and something wasn't 100%, working right, they came back, they fixed it, they stay in touch with you. You get calls every once in a while. I hate to say it, via bribery, taking you out to lunch or doing something like that. If they maintain that personal connection with you and they're doing a pretty good job, that does mean a lot. And when you say, hey, I have a problem with this, I need something, overnighted to me as a replacement, and they do it, and some other vendor you have just sort of, just tumbleweeds and, just nothing, then you're going to stay away from that. So yeah, that personal touch, but also the follow-up. Do you actually follow through with what you do? Yeah. Do you service what you say you're going to service? And then there's other situations where one of the vendors said, hey, there's we have this small, vendor fair or something like that, or some kind of technical get together. We'd like you to be involved on it. That also helps a lot because you get to talk to other people who have them as customers and find out, are these people on the level? Do they do a good job? That kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely. That personal touch is big. And obviously the follow through is huge.
Yeah. Ernie, have you found and this is the other thing too, has they ever come across like where maybe they try to partner with a specific manufacturer and try to work things out best with you, or is it really more, or is it, kind of like how Rob said, where they just try to really work the personal angle of it?
Well, I see them working both, I don't have the luxury that Rob has of going out to lunch with them. That's a big ethical issue here on our campus.
You didn't hear that. That was a joke. That was a joke.
I know.
Here are the magic words. Allegedly. Allegedly.
Yeah. But we do, I do have a good relationship with most of our vendors around here, and even some from outside our general area that come by and visit. And, a lot of it is just personal, getting to know the person and know what our needs are and how they can meet them. Sometimes they'll bring a manufacturer in and say, hey, this is something new. They'll share it with us. We do, probably 98% of our installs in-house. We have programmers, installers, all on the team. So it kind of changes the relationship when we do that. And I've got, some that while I still consider them friends that I've worked with for years and years, they have no interest in doing business with us. Okay. And, I'm fine with it. They tell me that up front, if we're not doing the install, we don't, we're not going to be your box house. I've got others that say, commission's a commission for me,
Yeah.
If I can sell you this stuff, and then, then at those points when I do need an install, because I don't have time or manpower to do something in the time frame the campus needs it, those people are already familiar with our campus and what we're doing. And, we'll give them a copy of our standard code that we put in the classroom so they can build around it, get something to work back into our system. But, that's kind of where we are.
That's fair. Just out of curiosity, Ernie, and Robin and I probably have had this scenario. In fact, I'm pretty sure mine was just about a week or two ago. You ever had a salesperson who you're like, God bless your heart, you're like, you did not do your homework. You just they just kind of like trying to come in and do the cold call, and you're just kind of looking, going, oh, not what you're doing.
We've been through that, and we've had a couple of vendors who seem to go through salespeople, and sometimes these are AV sales engineers, as we call them. Okay, and sometimes they're guys that they're salesmen. 6 months ago they were selling garden hoses to the nurseries around town, and now they're selling AV gear. And you see that deer in the headlight look when you start using technical jargon on them.
Oh,
they don't have the slightest idea what you're talking about. Right. What's HD-based T? I don't understand that one. Or they get HTCP and HDMI mixed up.
Oh, the fun one I always love to watch for this one, and Ernie, you've probably seen this too, is when you suddenly mention, oh, we actually do have an in-house programmer, and you can almost just see them trying to go, oh, it's like, yeah, guys, we do a lot in this, and they go, okay, all right, and it's like, okay, it's almost like the scene from Rocky where Ivan, with Drago lands a sizable punch. It's like, okay, got to recalculate here. But here's the thing: that's the only thing I'm hammering down with that is that the kind of days of cold call stuff. It's like, I get it. It's going to be a difficult thing. They still have to do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that, they're like at times they still try to hammer down the stuff, and it's like, okay, guys, you're gonna have to, go talk with like one of the manufacturing reps. And if actually that's one of the big things that I think really some of them should learn from that is go talk with some of the manufacturing reps. And I think they, a lot of the times they tend to cover a big number of products, but they also usually have like various folks where they look and go and say, oh yeah, oh you need that? Oh, I know which sales guy to talk to and this and that. And they can kind of help work it out a little bit.
Yeah. And I've been in the industry long enough. I know most of the manufacturers reps that come through and visit, and a lot of them come by and visit us as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or that, we're going to buy their product, we're going to put it in.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times if I've got a question about technology, I'll call them and say, why don't you get with any of your local vendors and come by and talk to me and show me this? Because, the demo's got to come through the vendor.
Of course.
Most of the time. So I said, I don't care which one you bring. I said, I'm supposed to be vendor agnostic, if you will. We can't have favored vendors.
No, yeah.
We do end up having those that are willing to help us every time, and so they get the unofficial status. But I'll call Middle Atlantic's rep, and he'll come by and he'll show up with one of the local dealers.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about what they've got. And they'll talk about, how they can get us a demo or a reduced price on a test piece.
Yeah.
Bring in and see how it'll work.
It's one of those things where it's just, it's almost like the, hey, instead of the cold call, it's the, oh, this is a friend of a friend, which, it kind of, it kind of puts everyone's hackles down because it's like, all right, well, you're vouching for them, so let's see how this goes. Speaking of seeing how it goes, that's about all the time we have today and everything. First off, Ernie and Rob, I do want to say thank you for both of you guys coming in and making time. Ernie, where can the fine folks find you online?
You can usually find me on LinkedIn.
All right, fair enough. And Mr. Raspberry, where can the fine folks find you, aside from being on the wonderful campus of Drexel? Where can they find you at?
You can find me on LinkedIn as well.
All right.
Yeah, it's a good place to be.
Fair enough. You say, folks, you can find me on LinkedIn as well as on Twitter and as well as just on the AVNation website. So that's a month. See you guys next month.